So hello and welcome to our webinar. I'm Ian Story. I'm a director in the tech business here at Hayes. I've got 25 years experience in tech recruitment, and we're here today to talk through some of the current factors impacting the tech market and how you can potentially overcome some of those key challenges faced. If you click through the slides to the next one. So firstly, to introduce our guest speakers, to give their expert insight in what's currently happening in the contract market we all face today. I've got joining us Anthony Sherrick. Anthony's the MD of Contractor UK. Anthony, it's great to have you back on this call. Contractor UK, as most of you will know, offers insight and data and information to the UK contract community. And it's great to have Anthony as part of the panel today. As well as Anthony, we've got Amanda Witcher. Amanda heads up and leads our public sector business in Hayes, and is really well positioned to give her expert analysis and view in some of the current and unique challenges that are facing the public sector market in the UK today. And finally, we've also got a number of our tech leads on the call today. These are people within our business that are subject matter experts in key technologies or industry sectors, and they'll give their insight and their thoughts into what's specifically happening in their areas in the market at the moment, be able to give us specific market insight that they'll share with you all today. If you flick through to the next slide. So to set the scene, we recently surveyed 800 of our clients and contractors to find their views in the current market. Full findings of the research will be available in our contractor rate guide, and that will be available for you all to access after today's webinar. This year, whilst the economy has been subject to undoubted change, we have seen a slowdown overall in the need for contract resource. Activity does still remain strong. 70% of our clients still expect activity levels to increase in the next 12 months. 23% said they'd stay the same. The main reason clients are looking to engage contractors again stay consistent. The number one being meeting peaks in demand. Number two being accessing skills for specific projects. Also, our research showed an increase of 7% in clients accessing contract resource to ensure their flexibility of their current workforce. And 57% of our clients still expect a shortage of suitable applicants in the year ahead. And that's really featured and highlighted around some of the niche skills that we're going to talk about later on in the presentation. If you flick through to the next slide. Okay. So we still have a skill shortage, even in a market that is slightly softening, with 9 in 10 clients facing a skills challenge in the last 12 months. So which skills were in most demand? So the top skills remain pretty consistent again compared to last year, and they were cloud, data, and cyber. Those were the top 3, and we'll deep dive into those areas later on in the presentation. The research also did show the soft skills becoming more and more important for our clients. And the top 3 soft skills that clients are looking for are strong communication skills, the ability to adapt to change, and also critical thinking from contractors that they bring on to work on their projects. If you click through the slides, one more. One area that's really emerging, and we saw it become a key area of our clients' technology roadmaps this year, was AI. ChatGPT grabbed the headlines. However, there's lots of skills uncertainties that are affecting the workplace when it comes to AI. 2/3 of clients felt from the survey that AI would have a positive impact on the workplace, whilst less than half of the contractors we surveyed thought AI would have a positive impact on their role. 59% of clients say that they're already investing in AI technologies, and 39% of them said they plan to access contract resources in the next 12 months to help them on that journey. If you click through to the next slide. We come on to day rates. So taking a look at the day rates of contractors, 61% of clients increased their day rates over the last 12 months by an average of 3.3%. 85% of those rates raised were a direct result of the standard of living costs increases and how that affected their contract workforces. The key areas to highlight: cybersecurity grew by 9.3% within the financial services market. It was a 5.8% increase outside of that. Also, cloud and intelligent automation saw increases of 5% and above. And to delve a little bit deeper into those key areas, I've invited some of the key subject matter experts that work exclusively in those markets onto this call today to give you increased data and visibility as to what's happening in those key areas. So if you flick through to the next slide, the biggest area and probably the most talked about outside of automation is cybersecurity. So on the call today, we've got James Walsh. James heads up our cyber practice in Hayes, and is all things to all people when it comes to cyber. And if I can hand over to James now, he can give you some insight and analysis to what he's seeing in that cyber market today. So over to you, James.
Sure, thanks, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Some key things really happening in the cyber world. Naturally, there is lots more incidents that are occurring that we see in the press that are high profile, which helps to spike demand as organizations see competitors and other organizations having incidents. And that's very much sector agnostic. That's both across the public and private sector. So that creates an increased demand as cyber has continually now year on year grown up the value chain from a risk perspective to organizations. So that's creating further demand. I think from the analysis from both last year's day rate guide and this year's, what we're seeing across the day rates for contractors is a lot less geo kind of diversity in terms of London being typically years ago was you could command a higher day rate for certain skill sets. That is now merging. There is no real differentiation between Edinburgh and London, between Birmingham and London, Manchester and Northern Ireland. All of the rates are pretty much flat, and the report kind of indicates that. There are slight nuances to that, but it's very much now, I think we're moving towards kind of national rates for certain skills. And that's been progressively happening over the last really since COVID had a big impact on that, with the fact that the workforce could be far more dispersed, and the fact that being on site all the time is now more of a rarity than a kind of a prerequisite for most organisations. There are obviously exceptions to that in defence, etc., and in some financial services markets, but predominantly that's driving a merging of rates and no real cost differentiation due to geography. Some of the key areas that both last year and this year have remained as key themes where rates have risen and demand is rising is across all things cloud security, because most people are moving on digital transformations into the cloud to some degree, whether that's public or private cloud. Additionally, security operations, that's still a big area. We see a lot more outsourcing in that domain now, particularly in the public sector. However, there is always going to be that element where organizations want to run their own security operations to a degree. And so we've seen high demand in security operations, security engineering. I think that will maintain into the coming years as well, and also security architecture. And an architecture from a base perspective, looking at everything from the networks through to lines of defense, right through to addressing risk across the business. But the key growth area is really cloud security, and that's merging into being kind of a prerequisite for all, particularly in an environment where most organizations are heavily Microsoft orientated, and with the Microsoft E5 license, they nicely offer Sentinel as a free product from a security operations perspective. However, we tend to help organizations around cost injection, because actually the tool might be free, but the data that passes through it isn't. So we see high demand around cloud specific experience and qualifications. One thing that has definitely emerged over the last 12, 18 months in the cybersecurity domain is the rise of OT cybersecurity requirements. And when we talk about OT, that's aligned to particularly to certain industries like pharma, logistics, med tech, defense, utilities. These are where they've got automated systems and technologies, or IoT, that connect to key critical assets. It could be for a manufacturing plant. It could be for example, Toyota, the manufacturing of the cars and the robots that put that together. Those systems don't typically connect to a usual internet source, but still rely on internet-based technologies. And a number of incidents that have been high in the press, such as Toyota, Royal Mail, and others, their incidents were all OT related. And they represent a real risk to organizations. If you can shut down manufacturing or logistics or the water supply, that's a significant risk both to private, public, and critical national infrastructure organizations. So that's an emerging area for anyone in cybersecurity that wants to kind of develop their skills. I would definitely look at OT cybersecurity.
Fantastic. Some really good insight there. Interesting you mentioned that leveling up piece and rates, and the fact that we're not seeing the regional variance. And I think that will bear true when everybody gets a chance to download the report and looks at some of the regional rate insight there. There's definitely been a move to level up those rates compared to what we saw a few years ago, and especially post-COVID, pre-COVID, sorry, and how those rates did fluctuate hugely between certain regions in the UK. Final question, James, before I pass on to our next speaker. You're speaking to cyber contractors day in, day out. It's our biggest rate growth area. It's probably our key market growth area in the UK. Any advice to clients on the UK, clients in the UK that are on the call today as to how best to engage and differentiate themselves when they're trying to secure a cyber resource?
One is definitely flexibility. 100%. Now organizations are fully prepared to have certain roles fully remote. Even the traditional roles like a security analyst and SOC analysts, where they were typically, the old Hollywood or Mission Impossible timely in terms of big screens in a room, in a darkened room, and almost like NATO style from films, that those environments are still required. However, more of the talent base are saying, look, we can do this remotely. And actually, that's kind of what the market is demanding, is remote. Now, fully remote is difficult in some roles, but actually, I think the barriers to offering remote, even in the security world, there are tools and techniques to mitigate that. And I think that opens up the talent pool. If for organizations that can't offer that, it is always a struggle. And we work with, defense organizations, we work with public sector defense as well, and government, and their key requirements are often is 100% on site, no mobile phones, etc., because it's at a DV level clearance and top secret. They won't ever do remote, but they're the ones that always have the hardest to fill positions, because candidates just don't want to do that anymore. So the number one would be to offer the flexibility and to create the tools and understand how you can navigate that even in a secure environment. It is still possible to do that.
Great insight. Thank you, James. I'm sure there'll be some questions for you when we get to the panel session at the end as well.
Thank you.
If you flick through to the next slide, if you don't mind. So next on the call, we have Adam Russell. Adam leads in our cloud practice in Hayes. Cloud is an area that we're seeing additional complexity and ever evolving and definite demand from our clients for these new and emerging skill sets. So I'll hand over to Adam to give you detail on what he's seeing in the cloud market in the UK.
Brilliant, thanks Ian. So morning guys, my name's Adam. I work for Hayes Technology up in Manchester. So a very brief background on myself. I oversee our wider digital technology practice up here. And I've been working within the public cloud channel for probably the past 8 years or so. So it's an area where I take a lot of interest about what's in demand and what sort of skills and services are on the horizon. I've only got a few minutes to talk through what myself and the wider team have observed in the cloud market in recent months. And what I've chosen to focus on is probably a couple of high-level trends and observations that we think will hold some sort of relevance over the next 12 months, including some specific tools and services that we anticipate are going to become increasingly desirable within the wider cloud market. And as a result, we'll probably then kick on to higher rates within that contract market. So to kick off with market share, I think most people on this call will be more than aware that Azure and AWS continue to dominate the public cloud market in the UK with regards to market share. I think Azure is obviously slightly the dominant force here. It's tough to pin down specific numbers, but we know that combined they occupy between 60 and 70% of the market share in 2023. What we are starting to see is a steady increase in GCP presence, with several predictions actually placing them either at 10% or some even sort of in excess of 10%, which is pretty significant strides compared to where they were in recent years. A lot of that, obviously, there's multiple factors. One major factor that's contributed to that is that Google seemed to be getting ahead of the curve when it comes to financial compliance and regulations in continental Europe. And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of major European banks and fintech organizations, Deutsche Bank as an example, are either going all in on GCP or at least bringing them to the table when it comes to form a more sort of hybrid solution, which does sort of lead us nicely into the topic of hybrid cloud models. So what we've seen is that as stakeholder knowledge and confidence in the ecosystem increases, a lot of customers are beginning to opt for more of a customized multi-cloud strategy, as opposed to sort of being shoehorned by the suppliers into putting all their eggs in one basket. And these hybrid models might mean either merging sort of two main suppliers together or combining one public cloud with their own private model. What it does is it can add a much needed degree of flexibility, so customers are able to design a solution that actually works for them and their business outcomes. But in addition to that, there's an added security benefit that can come with this type of model, essentially keeping your information in-house and behind your own four walls, which obviously to a lot of organizations is preferable. As a result of that, what we're seeing is expertise in more cloud agnostic applications and third-party tools, ones that aren't tied to one specific cloud, are always going to be in continuous high demand in the market, as are the architects with direct experience and actually the design and build of these customized offerings. So I touched on security a couple of seconds ago. Hopefully this doesn't cross over too much with what James said previously, but to sort of echo his thoughts, we're 100% seeing a huge spike in the need for cloud security skills. Migrating the cloud obviously has countless benefits, but it also exposes organizations to an entirely different range of cybersecurity threats. And on top of this, there's an ever-growing sort of pile of legislation around how businesses are allowed to store and use personal data, which means that confidence that an organization can actually keep that information securely under lock and key is becoming increasingly critical. So what we're seeing is an ever-growing demand from our customers for engineers and architects with a solid cloud security skill set. So we're talking about, from an AWS perspective, experience with tools such as AWS Security Hub, AWS Shield, AWS Config, and James touched on this before. From that Microsoft perspective, it's Azure Sentinel SIEM, it's Azure Active Directory, it's MS Defender for cloud. All definite areas of expertise that we would recommend keeping an eye on. And like I said, these are the tools and services that we're seeing a huge demand on, and we anticipate that that's going to have that ripple effect and kick on to the contractor market when it comes to the positions and the skill sets that have the highest rates. So to summarize, although I've sort of alluded to the fact that, GCP their market share is continuing to rise, Azure and AWS continue to remain the major players in this market, and we don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. We're hearing a lot of talk about generative AI, and I know, we're going to touch on that a little bit later on, but what we do know is that Amazon have actually been quite late to the AI party compared to a lot of its competitors, but they are quickly catching up. And what we've seen is that there's 4 key services in which AWS is investing in heavily. So we've got Amazon Code Whisper, SageMaker Jumpstart, Amazon Bedrock, and Amazon Titan. And it's 4 services that their partner sales managers are going to be pushing quite hard. So Tim's gone. Yeah, they're 4 services that are going to be getting pushed quite hard, and we imagine that's going to translate to key project needs before long. With regards to Microsoft, they've got their new end-to-end analytics solution, Microsoft Fabric, and that seems to be a major talking point amongst every data professional that we're speaking to. So that's also definitely something that we know we're going to be seeing a lot of over the next 12 months. And once again, people with that specific skill set we're going to anticipate are going to have the being the highest demand. So that's myself, a 5-minute overview of the UK cloud market, obviously through the eyes of our own professionals here. If anyone has any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'm sure we can schedule some time to go over that.
Brilliant. Some great commentary and some great analysis there as well on that market, Adam. One question, Adam, before you disappear. With the emergence of new technologies, as you say, Google and GCP creating new add-ons to their overall technology, is there a need for clients to be slightly more flexible in the skills that they're hiring, especially around the hybrid cloud model that's been adopted?
I think with public cloud, flexibility has always been at the forefront of what clients are looking for. And I think probably one of the main takeaways that we take from our continuous conversations with clients and candidates in the market is that a lot of our clients don't always, the reason that they're going out and hiring contractors is that they're not 100% sure what it is that they're actually looking for. So I definitely think there needs to be that aspect of flexibility. And I'd probably go one step further that, you know, the people that we're hiring, there's so many new tools and services that are coming onto the market with so many different sort of bells and whistles features. I think a lot of the time, if you're in a position as a customer that you do need to go out to a contractor, there's often a reason for that. And it's about allowing that contractor the flexibility to provide that sort of subject matter expertise into what tools and services are needed. I think we've sometimes seen instances where customers have tried to push a specific tool or service, you know, as a requirement, and you know, the subject matter expert comes in and educates them on the fact that that's actually not necessarily required. So yeah, flexibility definitely needed.
Okay, fantastic. Great stuff. Thank you for your time. Great stuff. Again, sure there'll be more questions for you potentially if we have time at the end as well. So if we click through to the next slide. As I mentioned in my overview, AI and automation has been one of the key talking points this year. ChatGPT definitely has grabbed all of the headlines, but at Hays, we've got a dedicated team now that focus on this area of the market, and it's probably generated more thought leadership and more client conversations than any other area of tech within our business. And we've got Cara Hopper, who's a senior member of that team. She's business director on that team on the call now, and Cara's just going to give you some insight into that market.
Thanks, Ian. So hi, everyone. I'm Cara Hopper. I'm Business Director for Intelligent Automation. So for those of you on the call that haven't yet touched on intelligent automation or AI within your businesses, intelligent automation encompasses robotic process automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, which is where we're seeing a lot in the news and media about the ChatGPT and generative AI and the effects that's having on businesses at the moment. So robotic process automation is the beginning part of any journey into automation and AI, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've seen in the trends in that particular market so far over the last 12 months. So first of all, 12 months ago we had 4 top vendors within the RPA market. We were seeing a lot of new releases within the RPA market, but those top 4 have remained the top 4. UiPath, Blue Prism, Microsoft Power Platform, and Automation Anywhere. UiPath is still in the top spots across both private and public sector organisations, and Blue Prism is what we're seeing is more favoured particularly within public sector in the NHS, and also in financial services and insurance organisations as well. What we have seen in the change that we didn't have 12 months ago is there's been a big increase in demand with Microsoft Power Platform. In particular, this is pushing up both salaries and also contractor day rates within that particular skill set. And more organisations this time last year were looking at sole skill sets within RPA and automation. And what we're seeing now is a trend that more organisations, not just consultancies, are looking for either dual or multiple skill sets and looking for more collaborative RPA and automation solutions to offer their organisations. So what we're seeing there is we are seeing more organisations looking for Power Platform with another skill set. So that has created a gap in the market because there are few professionals that do actually have the dual skill set and the multiple skill set within that. So we are seeing an upskilling from a lot of contractors and particularly focusing on the Power Platform certifications, largely because a lot of organisations do already have Microsoft technology within their businesses, licenses, etc. So it tends to be the favoured dual skill set that we're seeing at the moment in demand. Other areas that people are upskilling and we're seeing RPA professionals reskill into is your natural language processing, OCR, ABI models. Solonis for process mining is remaining very, very key within the market, although it's largely owned by consultancies at the moment. So there has been an increase in day rates over the last 12 months within the IA world, but it hasn't been an even increase. So what we've seen in the RPA area is that we're looking at a £400 a day sole skill set within RPA this time last year. That's been pulled up to around the 450 to 500 mark. And you are looking at more when you're looking for multi-skilled RPA and IA contractors, looking between 550 to 600, and the same for Power Platform as well, due to the recent increases. So where we've seen the biggest increases is in the Power Platform particularly, and also in the multi-skilled IA professionals in the contract day rates, as well as machine learning engineers and the AI specialists, due to the most recent increased demands. So for an ML professional or a data scientist that is skilled within machine learning algorithms, you're looking at least £600 to £700 a day, anywhere up to £1,200 a day, and then anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 for AI specialists as well. We are seeing largely, as James mentioned, the same with cybersecurity. Most contractors, we aren't seeing a location specific demand in terms of an increase for the London wages and day rates. However, IA contractors are happier in a remote working opportunity, although they are largely very happy to go into an office, as the nature of the projects that you're doing within IA are largely needed to be on site and stakeholder facing in those particular situations. So overall, we are expecting to see more of an increase over the next few months in Power Platform. We're expecting that to continue. Hopefully those people that were upskilling in those certifications are starting to come through and hit the market as the market demands increase. And of course, we're going to keep on seeing the increase in chatbots and generative AI, as well as the large language models, data science, and the overall AI specialists. We are also going to be looking at an increase in roles that don't yet exist due to the releases within AI. So the biggest question that a lot of people have is around the governance with AI and who's governing it within organisations, who's considering the ethics and the bias within the AI being used in organisations. So we're expecting to see an increase in AI ethics and biased experts, and also AI support specialists probably in the next year, who are going to be doing the troubleshooting for the AI related systems. So overall, we're expecting to continue to see the increase mostly more in the machine learning Power Platform and the chatbots and ChatGPT generative AI space.
Great insight. Thank you, Cara. Quick question for me before we move on. You mentioned around people updating their skills and looking at these skills as new emerging technologies. As a client, would you say these skills exist in the market? They should be hiring for people with existing skills, or is it a matter of trying to grow your own talent in these emerging technologies?
I think that there's definitely a way of that. I think at the moment, there's not enough people on the market that have got the dual skill sets and the emerging technologies. So there is definitely an increase in people that are taking on this responsibility to do self-certifications and upskilling in all of these areas. However, there is going to be a plateau when it comes to the skills on the market and the professionals available on the market. What I would say to most organisations is, if you are looking to implement automation and AI into your business, look at the roles that are going to be impacted and seeing if you can reskill those people that are already existing in your business. For example, one of the key areas that you're going to see maybe have an impact in the future is on first line support, desktop support. What are those people going to be doing in the future? Those people could be reskilled to troubleshoot AI processes and AI chatbots, for example. So I would say it's dual fold. You're not going to find it readily on the market. I would definitely say to most organisations, look at who you've got existing, look who's going to be affected in terms of their job and role profiles, and look to reskill within those areas, particularly within Power Platform. Great
answer. Thank you for your insight. If you could move on slides wise. Okay, next up we've got Amanda. I mentioned at the start of the presentation, Amanda's part of our panel for the Q&A session later on. Amanda's been in Hays, I think about 15 years now, and heads up our public sector technology business. And again, as I mentioned earlier on, is expertly placed to give real insight as to the unique challenges that are faced by public sector when accessing contract resources. So I'll hand over to Amanda to give you her views and insight.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, as Ian mentioned, I've been at Hays for 15 years, and during that time, I've been fortunate enough to always support public sector organisations in terms of technology contractors. I think when we look at it from a public sector stance, I think a lot of the content and insights that have already been shared are really relevant. But I guess maybe there's some slightly different challenges that we're sort of seeing across public services as a whole. So, digital transformation definitely continues to be high on the agenda. We are definitely seeing a more technology investment and actually recognition at board level from a CIO, CDIO perspective, which means that for a lot of public sector organisations, whether that be university, local government, central government, those individuals have got a bigger seat at the table than they've had before. And we know that digital transformation, data, AI are all going to be the things that really drive those organisations forward in the future. The challenges for public sector and the way that they're utilising contractors is probably slightly different to what we're seeing in the private sector. Whilst public services organisations have always used contractors as part of large programmes of work and key deliverables, implementations of new technologies and so on, actually it's being further exacerbated at the moment because of the demand that we are seeing across technology skills from a permanent perspective. So what that's meaning is that actually in a lot of instances, lots of public services organisations are really struggling to get the permanent staff in and really attracting and retaining those talent, especially, post sort of COVID, where we potentially had a number of contractors that were moved into permanent roles. What that's now created is a skill shortages, even within public services, that's slightly more challenging than what we're seeing across other industries and sectors. And so what that therefore is meaning is that the reliance on contractors to fill the void on some of those permanent roles is becoming ever greater. We definitely have seen an increase in terms of certain skills over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. Cyber is definitely key and high on everyone's agenda, whether you're an NHS organisation, a university, a council or central government. But actually the challenge I think that the public sector has had over the last 12 months is that they haven't had that perm capability in-house. And so they are very much now building and developing those cyber teams, obviously therefore using contractors to sort of complement that as well. In essence, in terms of from a rate perspective, I think public services is still behind private sector in terms of the rates that they offer, but we are seeing an increasing trend, especially for some of those niche skills around things like cyber and cloud, and obviously the introduction around sort of AI and also architecture, which seems to be high on the agenda for a lot of public services organisations at the moment, that actually those two worlds are becoming ever closer together. I think in essence, one of the challenges and lots of conversations that I have with CIOs across multiple areas of public services is we do need to think differently around how we utilise our contractors. How can we use them to support and upskill our staff and skills that we have internally, especially around things like cyber, architecture and cloud, and even sort of data, because actually from a data perspective, there's still a long journey that those public services organisations are on. So really, how can we utilise skills better with our contractors to support the growth of our internal permanent staff, which obviously will help aid retention, but also how do we start looking at the way that we engage those contractors and how we sort of support them, but also providing that sort of flexibility. I think it was James that mentioned it earlier around, especially where you've got secure sites and public services organisations quite often do want people on site more than off site. The reality is that, where we're in a skill short market, but also we've got challenges around sort of pay and day rates, we need to start thinking about what advantages can we really give to those contractors to really engage them to work in public services. Contractors are absolutely key in helping support and drive the digital transformation that needs to happen across DDAT as a whole, across public services. but we also need to understand that to attract those people, we need to think differently and challenge ourselves.
Great stuff, great insight. Quick question before we let you go. Loads of talk about levelling up in the UK and lots of roles moving out of, say, London. Are you seeing that as a trend from a contractor perspective? Are we seeing more roles appear in the north, or anything there that you want to add?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 points there. So I guess in terms of levelling up from a government perspective, I think, as we've seen a number of times, it's not the first time that government have tried to do this. And I think we've had some successes with some key departments. The challenge is really understanding for organizations what skills actually exist in these areas. So that's great if we're going to set up a location that's a bit further afield, but actually do those tech skills actually exist in that market? I think in terms of from I guess the use of contractors is definitely national. We've definitely seen, because of the flexibility, that we have got the ability to recruit people from all areas of the UK. In some instances, if, for example, a client's based in London, but actually they can now recruit candidates based in Newcastle, actually that does offset some of the challenges around sort of pay, because there is still some differentiator in things like projects and change, but not in some sort of specialist skills. But I think definitely, similar to what James said, again, there's much more fluidity in the market. That fluidity is going to continue. And so therefore we need to think and look at how we adapt as organizations to enable that fluidity to continue to give us the access to skills that we need. Brilliant.
Thank you. Cheers for your time, Amanda. Great insight. If we flick through to our final subject matter expert from Spring, from Hayes, sorry. We've got Nick Finley on the call now. So Nick is a key director within our financial services business. FS is a key market for Hayes. I'll hand over to Nick now to give you some insight into what he's seen in that sector.
Thanks, Ian, and good morning, everybody. So I guess 4 points from me, looking at the last 12 months in terms of hiring in FS. I focus on the London market, but also look regionally as well and manage a team of account managers who face off to some of our key clients. So the first one is geography. We've already talked about it a little bit, but just to give a bit more detail, we are seeing a much higher demand for financial services tech candidates in some of the regional centres. So, for example, Cardiff, where Legal and General Investment Management are key hirers. Manchester, where Insight Investment, JP Morgan, Starling Bank and others are all competing for talent there. And Birmingham, where Goldman Sachs is really building out much more of a presence. There's a perceived lower cost in these centres, but I think the reality is, and there's something that we're seeing a lot more at the moment, is that actually what that's doing is pushing rates up to near parity with the main financial centres of London and Edinburgh. So some of the cost savings are more being seen through lower rental rates and lower cost of business rather than lower contractor day rates, which are really very similar now throughout the UK. Also, in terms of the geographic side of things, we're seeing a lot more roles, development roles, being either offshored or outsourced to some consultancy companies within the market. So particularly Eastern areas like Poland, Eastern European areas like Poland are major hirers and actual real lower cost hirers of some of the dev contractors. So that's from a geographic point of view. Remote working. What we're seeing is investment management firms very much sticking to their 3 days a week. Investment banks are 4 days, or possibly more in some circumstances. It's meaning that it's a lot harder to convert offers for our tech contractors than FS firms when they can be offered purely remote working, or maybe 1 day a month having to be in the office from, for example, media, fintech and consultancy firms. So we are seeing a bit of a competition out there when it comes to remote working and that being offered at offer stage. My third point is M&A. So seeing much more increased M&A taking place, over this year. So I think of some of the major firms either merging or have bought each other. Rathbones in Vestec Wealth is a major one within the investment management world. UBS Credit Suisse, which is a merger that's taking place at the moment. RBC Bruin, BMO GAM, Columbia Threadneedle, pushing up demand for change-focused BAs, project managers who have gone through those mergers, previously, and also it's increasing cloud people. So to be able to, to merge the infrastructure and network backbones of organizations as well. And then finally, generative AI. We actually ran an event here. I'm in the boardroom in London. We ran an event here for 70 heads of tech from financial services firms and other sectors as well, all who wanted to come and understand what's happening within generative AI, what use cases are taking place within firms currently. I think the upshot is that most firms are in the investigatory stage currently. And there's a debate over what is generative AI and actually what is automation. Automation seems to be becoming very popular, at the moment as well with generative AI. In terms of use cases are mainly centering right now at this early stage on legal documentation, marketing content, and front office research. So that's what we're seeing within financial services currently.
Thank you, Nick. I will save the questions for you because I'm conscious of time. I'm sure there'll be some at the end as well. But yeah, great insight into what's happening in financial services in the UK at the moment. Thank you very much for that. Before we hand over to the panel, just a couple of additional slides from me. And I'd like to touch on just a little bit on what matters most to contractors and the top things that they value most when considering a contract role. And I think all the speakers have touched on it. That work-life balance piece is still top, 47%. And second, being challenging roles and giving them access to new and emerging technologies. One interesting piece of insight from the survey, and there'll be more detail of this in the actual report itself, is an emerging area that's becoming more and more of a key factor to contractors is working for clients that have got a clear purpose. And contractors looking for organizations that align to their key values, as well as looking at the technology aspect of the projects they're going to work on. So that's definitely something to consider for clients to highlight in roles and job specs when they're hiring for contract resources. If you click through, and in this post-COVID world, we continue to track contractors' preferences in the ways that they work. And from our report, there's still a disconnect, or probably an increasing disconnect there, where contractors are still looking for fully remote or part remote, and clients are increasingly looking to move back towards a more traditional office-based working pattern. And it's well worth clients being aware, and it's, James referenced it earlier, and Amanda, that being able to offer remote working will still be seen as a key differentiator by most niche tech contractors. Again, more detail of that in the full guide when you can access it later. And finally, if you click through one more slide. So I hope everybody found that interesting. They're just some of the key findings from the report. There's loads more data and insight in the report itself, as well as hundreds of typical day rates across the UK and Ireland, across the key job families that all of our clients recruit into. If you visit the website, our website after the call, you can request a copy of that full document. Okay, I'll hand over to the panel now. I see we've got a few questions in the Q&A box as well. So if I create them, and I'll ask the people on the call to answer. So the first question, and this one is to you, Anthony. Loads of change in the tech industry in recent months. What do you perceive as the biggest challenges to the contracting industry?
Thanks a lot, Ian. Thanks for inviting me on, and just some amazing insights just listening to everybody. And I know from the report it's really extensive, so definitely worth looking at. From the biggest challenges, I suppose, the contracting industry, from a macro point of view, it's the economy. Sometimes when the economy slows down, the contracting side can go up, as people do not get the budgets, or clients do not have the budgets to hire perm staff. But we have seen a slowdown probably in the contractor demand this year. I think looking at the rep reports, that demand for IT contractors actually stopped growing. in May 2023 for the first time in about 2.5 years. So I think there's an element of the economic uncertainty that's feeding into the contractor world. And while there's always strong demand for contractors and the niche skills, as you've seen, I suppose where it impacts contractors is that there's a bigger talent pool for clients to draw from, and therefore the daily rate is probably not as high as during a boom time when the economy slows down. As I said, the demand for contractors is still there, but the rate that they can demand is probably not as high because of the competing talent pool. But as you know, across your business, you highlighted that can vary between sector. So the economy will impact contractors, but where you talk about cloud security and cyber security, cloud architects, data and analytics, that demand is still there. Firms will always want contractors, and those niche skills will definitely be in demand. From a legislative point of view, it's been, as always in the contracting market, it's never straightforward. In the last 12 months, we saw Liz Truss throw a world of excitement and panic and everyone going into a frenzy because they scrapped IR35 and then 4 weeks later decided actually it's all about financial stability and let's change that again. So the contracting world was thrown into a massive frenzy just for the 4 weeks, like a little tease in a way. So I think it will be pretty stable in terms of potential legislative changes over the next 12 months. And I think therefore clients also need to continue to plan how they're going to bring contractors into their company, and whether, you know, trying to avoid blanket bans. And more all the surveys and research has shown that over time, as companies understand more about the risk involved with using limited company contractors, that they can be more flexible in who they're looking to attract in terms of the working model, and not just relying on 100% umbrella, but maybe looking at the outside IR35 roles as well, not just making it blanket across the company. Because actually the government has started they've published a consultation on policy options to regulate the umbrella companies, which is until the end of August. People can feed into that. And whilst I don't think that anything drastic will come out of that over the next 12 months, it's interesting that they've pushed a lot of contractors towards the umbrella model, but now they're looking at trying to regulate potentially the umbrella industry. So in my summary, I think the economy is the main driver for contractor demand, contractor day rates at the moment, because of the slowdown that we've all seen. From a legislative point of view, I think that hopefully will be quite stable over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Anthony. Some really good insight there. Another question that came through whilst you're talking, just on that point as well. I referenced that the rising cost of living had been a rising factor in rate discussions in the UK. Is this something that you've seen from your side, and do you perceive that to become a bigger discussion in that contractor community in the next 12 months?
From what we've seen, actually, it's pretty similar to the results that you showed earlier, which is interesting, and the rates have sort of stabled out a bit. I think the Hayes research showed a 3.3% earlier in the presentation, which is pretty similar to the data that we get fed, in that because of probably overall in the technology market, because there's a bigger talent pool, therefore the rates have not risen in the way they have over the last couple of years. And again, that varies. The caveat is that varies between the different areas, such as cyber, data and analytics, etc. But even though the cost of living crisis is pushing, people are looking for more income, if you like, I think the market has slowed down, and there will be some stability overall in tech contractor day rates over the next 12 months. So pretty similar to the data, actually, when I was comparing it to what you've presented earlier on.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Amanda, obviously cost of living increases probably have a slightly greater impact on public sector and maybe some of the lower level contractors working within public sector. Have you seen any particular trends or nuances around that, the rise of cost of living conversations in public sector?
Yeah, I think it's felt by everyone, isn't it? And it doesn't matter how much money, if you're at the top of the scale or the bottom of the scale, at some point you're still going to feel that cost of living because you're used to a certain way of life and so on. I think definitely it's a factor. It's definitely a factor to some of the clients that we engage with, and the challenges that they face along with sort of contractors. I think really, in terms of our sort of views and how we sort of engage and sort of feedback, it's really about having a sensible conversation. The reality is that, if you've got a certain niche skill and a certain program of work that needs delivering, you're going to have to pay higher rates. But actually, maybe in some instances where you're looking at projects and change, actually, maybe you can take someone slightly less experienced. So I think there's a bit of a balancing of the books, I guess, in terms of looking at it from a wider sort of skills perspective. I think that the challenges that we will face in public sector, I think, over the next 12 months is I think there's going to be increased pressure on budgets. So cost of living is one instance, but obviously the overall economy and how public sector is obviously funded, and especially around central government, I think that we will see some challenges. But I think also the reality is that we all know we have to invest in technology in an economic downturn, because actually that's where we're going to get the long-term cost savings. We know there's going to be a huge implementation around sort of AI and automation to help ease that for the future. But I think it's still part of the conversation. I think will continue to be part of the conversation over the future.
Good stuff. Great. Thank you, Amanda. We've got 6 minutes left, so hopefully we have time for 2 more questions. One question in the chat, James, for you and Adam. We talked about cyber, we talked about cloud and the growth in those sectors. People on the call interested to know if there's any key qualifications the clients look for in those areas, or any key qualifications that people should look to attain to be more desirable in those 2 markets.
Yeah, sure. In terms of cyber and like other, there's a plethora of qualifications, and they can be, particularly in the cloud environment, they can be specific to the cloud provider. I think in general, the ones that I point to at differing levels within in cybersecurity are Security Plus. It's a positive entry level qualification. It's quite comprehensive and it's a nice segue for people who have perhaps been in other domains across technology and IT. There are lots of correlations with infrastructure, service, etc. within that qualification. The main sought after one for people with experience is still CISSP. That's still seen as the kind of gold standard. Now, there are limitations to that because there has to be a certain level of time working in the cyber domain before you can actually sit that exam. So that does have a prohibitor to it. For the kind of deep technical and kind of everyone associates cybersecurity predominantly with pen testing, although that's one niche area of cyber. Being a certified ethical hacker and getting qualified in that domain sets people up for a whole domain within security operations, threat intelligence, etc. really nicely. And then on the more governance, risk and compliance side, so looking more at regulatory and implementing best practice, where the main growth is around ISO 27001 is still very popular, so getting certified to a foundation or implementer or auditor is recommended, but equally NIST is heavily growing as a framework that people are adopting. So that's something that I think is a growth area in the GRC space. And then as you get more senior in that domain, I would say it's C-risk as well. It would be the other qualification. There are many others that are very kind of nuanced to certain different pillars of cyber. But yeah, that we can probably share what those are, and if anyone wants to know, and I've got a very nice kind of qualification chart that we put together where those sit in those domains, and what kind of careers they lead to. So they would be the main ones I would point to in the cyber world.
Great, so thank you, James. Adam, I don't know if there's anything you would add from a cloud perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. What I will say is that I think some of the cloud certificate, look, often there's a a preconception within the tech world that, you know, some certifications sometimes aren't necessarily worth the paper that they're written on. And I think sometimes there's customers and clients that don't necessarily pay a huge amount of heed to them at the lower level. But I do think, and what we've seen within the cloud space, all three of the public cloud have put together quite robust certification paths that potentially at the bottom level, you take like an AWS cloud practitioner certification, unless it's, you know, going in at a real entry level, it might not necessarily have the credence that maybe the person holding it desires. But as you start to go up the ranks and the certifications, you know, the expert level certifications within Azure, and then particularly within AWS, as you get towards what they refer to as the professional certifications, particularly within the consultant partner space, we do feel that they have, you know, they are recognized quite significantly. To use a real life example, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional Certification is renowned in the industry as an incredibly challenging certification to achieve, and requires an extensive and broad knowledge of various aspects of the AWS ecosystem, including artificial intelligence, security, data ops, etc. So being able to acquire that certification is quite a significant statement to being able to demonstrate your subject matter expertise in that area. So yeah, I'm more than happy to double down that I think some of the expert and professional and speciality level certifications are well worth getting.
Great stuff. Thank you. Great answer. One other question on there was just positives from a contractor perspective and also positives from a client perspective from the report and the findings that we produced. I think one key positive from a contractor perspective is, although there's a softening of demand, as Anthony referenced and I referenced earlier on, there is still a key demand for tech talent in the UK market, and rates are holding parity, if anything, moving slightly up with that increase in the rising cost of living. We definitely aren't seeing the huge increases we saw last year, but rates aren't falling in tech in general. And from a client perspective, there really is the opportunity to access niche tech talent. We aren't in the market that we were 12 months ago, where it was almost impossible in some cases to find niche talent. So, you know, if you are providing flexibility on that work-life balance, you're highlighting the key technologies that a contractor would get exposure to, and you're potentially building in that purpose and aligning a purpose to that of a contractor. There's a great opportunity in this current market to secure niche tech talent in those key areas that are going to help drive your digital transformation and your business forward as well. I hope everybody enjoyed that today. We're bang on time. As I said, the report itself will be available for everybody to access after this call. Everybody's on the call, you'll get an email through that'll give you a link to request a copy of it. It's also available at request a copy on our website as well. In the email we'll send through, I'll also add in the email addresses of everybody that's been on the call today. And if you want to pick up some more specific conversations around cyber with James, or Adam with cloud or FS or public sector or automation, then please pick up with those people individually. Thank you very much for your time.